Hi everyone, if you want to see an example of an article that is excellent, an example of an article that you would never see on the BBC or in The Guardian or anything like that, I want to show you this. This was tweeted out by George Galloway this morning, and I wasn't aware of it, the Newsfront Information Agency, but this article is just excellent because what they've done is they've interviewed an expert on international terrorism, an Israeli guy called Alexander Brass. And I just want to read you a bit of this article because it really does highlight all the obvious things that you and I have been, no doubt, talking about for the last 8 months or whatever it is, that the press just never cover. They never cover these questions, ever. So the article says this. An Israeli expert on international terrorism, writer Alexander Brass, shared his view on the case of the Skripal's poisoning in Salisbury. Brass draws parallels between the work of the special services of Israel and Russia. He believes that if to compare the British version with the practice of the special agents, then the absurdity becomes obvious. Basically, just look at it. These two guys have, on Russian passports, flown directly into the UK to apparently assassinate this guy with a nerve agent that was developed in the Soviet Union and could be pointed straight towards the Russian state, and then hopped on a plane and went straight home in full view of all the cameras. It's just a nonsense. British Special Services would never act like that. And there were so many easy questions that you just have to ask that would just stump the authorities totally. They wouldn't be able to answer them, and the reason they don't ask them in the media in this country is because this is the sort of answers that they would get, and it would blow a massive hole in their official story. So the first question is this: Alexander, so what in your opinion happened in Salisbury? And he says, there was a rough provocation by the British Special Services. In my opinion, this is obvious. And I've said all along that the key to this is ex-MI6 agent Christopher Steele. He's the key to this whole story being blown up, us seeing the truth. Whether we ever will or not, probably not. Probably not, let's face it. But definitely the story that we've been told is complete and utter bollocks as far as I'm concerned. Then he was asked, why do you think so? So why do you think it's the British Special Services? And he says this: there's a lot of stupidity on stupidity. The story with Petrov and Bosharov does not hold up to any professional peer review. According to the Brits, the Skripals were poisoned by GRU agents. And he goes on to say that GRU disbanded in 2008. However, there is still a department that acts like the GRU within the Russian state. I want to explain how the special services work, he continues. If you need someone to eliminate, then this is a very serious question, especially in a foreign country, like the UK. If you need someone to eliminate, this is a very serious question, which is being prepared for a long time. It's obviously something that you would have to really plan out in huge detail, especially if you're working for the intelligence services with all the power that they have. A very significant material and human resource is allocated. We are talking about dozens of employees on the territory of this state. An advanced command post is being created. So saying you would create more, it would be more than 2 people, that's for sure. You would have all sorts of people involved, and you would have a command post and safe house and blah, blah, blah as well. So in the operation, a technical support group, a logistic group, a cover group, an external surveillance group, and a group of performers are involved. This is how he said it would go down if it was a state-sanctioned hit on the Skripals. The performers themselves appear at the very last moment. So the people who would actually the assassins, they would be in and out like a shot and probably undetected because of all the groundwork that would be done around, the cameras, the transport, everything would have been planned down to the minutest detail if it was the British forces doing it somewhere, or the Israeli forces, or the American forces. So therefore, it would be the same for the Russian forces as well. They're just as good as intelligence as us, if not better in some cases, most people say. It goes on to say they appear at the very last moment. They do not go anywhere, lighting up on cameras, so they wouldn't be lit up on cameras, or very few of them. They wouldn't use public transport as the Skripal alleged assassins did. But move on rented cars, which they wouldn't rent themselves, or the people would rent them and then they would use those cars. This is all making sense to me. It's all common sense stuff. And the more they will not stop in hotels, but will live in safe houses provided by the logistics group. The Skripals stopped in a single bed hotel room, and apparently, according to some reports, had prostitutes and were having sex and smoking marijuana. You certainly don't do that if you're an agent saying, "Hey, look at me, look at me." You just don't do it. These are all common sense questions which are never asked or never answered in the British media, ever. Such groups do not come under the passport of their country, do not go to the embassy for obtaining a visa, leaving fingerprints. This is complete nonsense. Professionals do not work that way. Of course, you wouldn't get a visa from Russia to come into the UK if you were a Russian assassin trying to assassinate somebody in the UK. You would come on a fake European Union visa, a European Union passport, for instance, which wouldn't require a visa and fingerprints and blah, 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 blah. Oh, if the GRU acted, both the killers and the other participants in the operation would come to the UK on the passports of other countries that have visa-free relations with it. I've just said that, the EU, for example. Here, two alleged GRU officers go to the embassy, leave their fingerprints there, get a visa, stop at the hotel, pass under the other cells. You will not find this even in ladies' detective novels. Well, it's a bit disparaging, but then again, I don't know any females that write detective novels. Maybe somebody can enlighten me. The guy interviewing then goes on to say, maybe it is unprofessionalism associated with the degradation and decay of the Soviet Union. So what he's saying there is maybe the decay of the Soviet Union, the breakup of the Soviet Union, has led somehow to the intelligence services in Russia becoming the laughing stock of the world and just useless at what they do. That's, an argument that is given to the questions if they are ever asked. And he replies with this. He says, this is an opinion at the level of kitchen conversations. Where did the armed forces and the military-industrial complex of the Russian Federation manage to raise such a bardack to such a level as they could organise the World Cup and the Olympics at such a high level? Exactly. They can. The World Cup was an absolute masterpiece of how to host a world event. The Olympics was great as well, apart from obviously the doping apparently. It's a good point. They can organise a World Cup, but they can't organise their own special intelligence units. Come on, give me a break. That's what the guy is saying. And he goes on to say, if the GRU decided to eliminate Skripal, then I have a question. Why was the Novichok used? And this is something that I have asked repeatedly. Why use something that can be pointed straight back to Russia? This makes no sense whatsoever. Pull the other one. It's got bells on. And then he goes on to give examples of how, first of all, Novichok, it's a chemical weapon of mass destruction. It's like dropping an atom bomb on a city to kill one criminal. And then he goes on to say, listen, if they really wanted to poison him, they would poison the guy in a way that A, you wouldn't even know he was poisoned, and B, there would be no trace of it. And he goes on to explain the Israelis have done this and admitted to it in the past. And then there's this little paragraph. The interviewer says, could the GRU not have been able to use some other poison and not the Novichok, which leaves traces everywhere? If such technologies were in the special services already in the 1950s, does the GRU have them today? Well, of course they do. And Brass replies by saying, let's talk about the cameras. The UK on this some kind of fad. In no country in the world is there such a number of surveillance cameras per capita. It's very true. Drive down a motorway in the UK and just look up. Every 100 yards there's a camera. Go into a city centre and look. There are cameras everywhere in this country. We are living in a surveillance state. It's video that I'll be doing later, by the way. Brass continues, if I'm not mistaken, about one camera for 15 people. Literally every metre is looked through. MI5, the British Counterintelligence Service, is considered one of the best in the world, and if Britain took care of Skripal, he was very well guarded. At least his house was hung with all the cameras, which are only possible. He's saying they're the cameras at the Skripal house. And he goes on to say, if according to the MI5 these agents visited Salisbury, they came to the house of the Skripal and coated the door handle with this substance. So show the records from the cameras. How can it be that that it was at this point the cameras suddenly turned off? The interviewer says, but maybe these agents found the cameras and turned them off. And Brass replies, if you say that the GRU has deteriorated so badly that it has lit up everywhere and left its mark, why did this degraded intelligence agency manage to turn off the surveillance cameras near the Skripal house at the right time? Where is the logic? There isn't any. That's the thing. There isn't any. Excuse me. Interviewer then says, let's admit, all this looks really strange. First let out Skripal and then kill him. Why would it have been easier? Would it not be easier to just leave him in jail? He could have offed him in jail and there would have been very little furore. He was in jail from 2006 to 2010 before Skripal was released on this spy swap deal. Brass replies to that now about the personality of Sergei Skripal himself. The main version, which is voiced by the British side, is revenge. And he goes on to say, intelligence services don't do revenge. They just don't. It's all very methodical. It's all planned, and revenge isn't part of it at all. And they certainly, they wouldn't have poisoned him when he's already been in jail for 4 years back in the 2000s. I'll leave a link to this article below, but I just want to talk about this. There is an opinion that he was eliminated because he taught at the counterintelligence school and taught young employees how to deal with the GRU. And Brass replies with this, and what in MI5 except for Skripal? No one knows how to do it. I think they know it better than him. Exactly. The special services would know how the GRU operates much better than Skripal, who, remember, was just a captain or a colonel in the army. He goes on to say, there's Brass, there was no motive. Then imagine they used Novichok. They carried it with them in a bottle of perfume. In the practice of special services, this does not exist. Performers go light with other people's passports. They receive weapons on the spot. And when such group of liquidators works, it works autonomously, without affecting the local residency. In case of failure, do not harm the residents. When the surveillance is working and the capture team is working, they do not know each other in person. They communicate only through certain communication channels. Exactly. They certainly wouldn't travel to the UK with the with the Novichok in a bottle of perfume going through customs, which is what we're led to believe. Come on, MI5. Come on, MI6. Come on, Tory government. Pull the other one. It's got bells on. Everything about this story stinks of absolute horseshit. Interviewer then says this. The question is also why the poison did not act instantly and Skripal was still wondering about for a few hours. This is another thing that people like me, and people with a brain ask. Come on, if this is 8 times more potent than VX gas and it kills in seconds, why was Skripal and his daughter able to wander about for a few hours and have a meal and go for a walk in the park and then go to a pub? It just makes no sense at all. He replies, this guy does, it's a different matter. The British are so disrespectful to Russia that even provocation cannot be done at a decent level. It's even humiliating. Therefore, Russia does not comment on this in any way. And why is it necessary to comment on some kind of nonsense? It took over half a year for Brits to find the suspects, although they left their full personal data and fingerprints in the embassy when they received visas. This is a separate nonsense. Then Russia said, please, here they are, here's their interview. If they were active GRU officers, they would not have left their fingerprints in the embassy for anything. Exactly. If they were active GRU officers, they wouldn't have got a passport with fingerprints. Come on. This is Keystone Cops level of crap that you're asking us to swallow. Who are they? Asked the interviewer. And Brass says, I do not know who they are, but certainly not employees of special services. If the GRU needed to kill Skripal, he would now be dead. This would have been done quietly and without scandal. Exactly. And then the interviewer asked the all-important question, why did Britain do this? And he replies, this is a well-thought-out strategy of demonisation and international isolation of Russia. In the UK, as in the rest of the Western world, everything works very simply. Most people do not read newspapers at all, and those who read do not understand half. But everyone sees the headlines. Provocation with the Skripals is needed to exclude the Russian Federation from the Commission for investigating the use of chemical weapons in Syria. This is a minimum program. And he's basically saying there, this is all a propaganda construct to demonise Russia in the eyes of the public, because people only read headlines, and therefore demonise them in this, whenever the White Helmets do one of their false flag videos in Syria. I'll leave a link to this article below, but it's really, I've never heard of that source before, and I'm assuming that Brass is what he claims to be. I haven't done any checks on him, but he certainly does seem to respond with the right responses, the common sense responses. But the point I want to get back to in this, after, that was a great article that asks a lot of questions that are answered in a common sense way. These questions are never asked in the British media, or if they are asked, they're asked at the very end of the article. One little paragraph. As I say, is it down here? The Fourth Estate is dead. The Fourth Estate, the media in this country are supposed to hold our intelligence services, our government. They're supposed to hold them to task. They're supposed to be the guardians of them, to watch them, to report on their corruption, to report on their lies. They're not doing it now. They just become stenographers for their lies. And this is why channels like mine are getting more popular. I don't know what happened with the Skripals. I don't. I cannot say that with any certainty. And I don't know who these two guys are. That's for sure. I just don't know. One thing I can say for certain now, having looked at all the evidence for as long as I have and delved into it, these two guys didn't try to kill the Skripals, and these two guys definitely didn't leave that bottle of perfume in the charity basket for Dawn Sturgis to pick it up. I think Dawn Sturgis was the name, unfortunately. And that seems to me like it's some sort of cover-up to give the operation some sort of credence and to blame Russia again. Killed somebody this time. It's rubbish, is what the government are telling us. Absolute rubbish. There's no way that Russia have done this. And there's no way that these two guys are GRU operatives. There's no way that they are assassins. So what happened there is what the press in this country really should be asking, rather than this is what happened according to the government, which is what they're doing. What they should be doing is asking questions such as, why, oh why, as I have pointed out in every video I've done now for the last 6 or 8 videos on the Skripals, why did the government put a D notice on Christopher Steele's name when the Steele dossier came to light from BuzzFeed at the beginning of 2017? Why did then the top guy at GCHQ, I think it was GCHQ, it might have been MI5 or MI6, resign when details of that came out shortly afterwards? Why did the government put a Motorola salesperson as the head of our chemical and biological weapons, our largest chemical and biological weapons facility in the UK, I think in Europe? Why did they put a Motorola salesman as the head of that? Why was it that all this happened to coincide with the largest chemical and biological weapons drills on Salisbury Plains, just a few miles away from where the Skripals were allegedly poisoned? Why? What about the time that ended the day the Skripals were poisoned? Why is it that the newspapers don't mention Christopher Steele or Pablo Miller, who was Pablo Miller was the another person that the government put a D notice on, and Orbis Business Intelligence, Christopher Steele's company. All of this is where the newspapers should be looking, but they're not. They're pushing the propaganda from the government onto the people, and it's working. As that guy said in that interview, this is what they only want: the headline. That's all. They just want the headline. As long as the headline's there, the people will fall into place. Well, I've got news for you. People are waking up. People are waking up, and people are starting to ask serious questions of this. And I still have not met a member of the public who believes what the government are trying to sell us. These two guys, they, in my opinion, all the evidence points to them working for Russian MOD in some capacity. Maybe they are ex-GRU agents, maybe they are. But I do find it interesting, and I'm going to do a video on this later, today or tomorrow, because the information that was come out on these guys as to who their names are and why they're connected to the Russian ministry, and the fact that they had a medal, all of this information has seemingly come from Bellingcat, which is, the government say, are highly sophisticated people who look at evidence and open source material, and they do great work. Well, let me tell you something about Bellingcat. They're not all the newspapers and the press make them out to be. They're a propaganda organisation. I'll get to that in another video. But I just wanted to do this video just to highlight all of these questions that were asked in this interview that are never asked from the British media ever. And the British media, print and broadcast, all should be hanging their heads in shame at their reporting on this affair, because it has been nothing short of pathetic. Fortunately, because I'm reporting it in a way that they're not, my channel's getting more popular as a result, so let them carry on. I would prefer them to do their job and me not do this at all, but I'm happy to carry on anyway. What a joke this is. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and click the bell below. Independent voices like mine are being censored across all social media platforms by large tech companies at the behest of governments who don't like the fact that people like me are out there getting more popular, telling the truth and ruining their propaganda. Unfortunately, they come after us monetarily as well, so we have to rely on our audience to fund our work. So if you can support independent media, do so. I've left a link to my Patreon down below, and you can sign up to it for as little as $1 a month, and every dollar helps. I cannot stress that enough. Thanks very much for your support. Until next time, peace and take care.